This is Dawoud the Renegade Sufi offering the greetings of peace to all of you renegades and renegates, and welcome to this installment of my vlog. I was going through some computer files, organizing a few things, and I found something that I thought I'd like to share with you. Now, I do a radio program. It airs on Saturday mornings at 3 a.m. on WPAT 9:30 a.m. As of this video recording. And it's a half-hour segment of a show called The Overnight Shift. I've been doing it for a while, and it's a continuation of an earlier show, segment I did on the Ralph Romeo radio show on the same station. And the executive producer and I one morning were having a discussion about music. Now, this vlog centers around music, and the discussion was pretty nuanced and brought up a lot of interesting points that I thought I'd like to share with you. So here it is from the archives of my radio program, and, well, enjoy it and make up your own minds. Angel of Air, a collaboration between Carlos Santana and Alice Coltrane from the Illuminations album. And it also featured Gary Bartz on the soprano saxophone, Dave Holland on the bass, and Jack DeJohnette on the drums. And I was talking to Brother William Kareem while I was playing, and I was mentioning to him that there was a point during John Coltrane's life when, towards the end of his life, he had arranged to take music lessons from the great sitar virtuoso Ravi Shankar. And unfortunately, that was not meant to be because John Coltrane died before that could happen. But it was all set. They were going to spend 6 weeks together. And I mean, can you imagine what a heavy cat you got to be to have John Coltrane coming to you for music lessons?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all you can say in such a situation is wow.
Well, you know, the whole idea of playing on the sitar, it has a different scale, all right?
It has different scales.
Than the American,
Yes,
American
yes,
taste
yeah.
of
There's,
music.
yeah, there's in the Western system, there's basically it's major, minor, augmented, and diminished. Whereas in the North Indian Hindustani system of Indian raga, there's 10 major modes. They're called tats, which are, they're scales that form the basis of the construction of a raga, which itself is a template for improvisation or composition.
And I guess that's what John Coltrane was interested in.
Yeah,
would basically expand his understanding and his horizon as far as music is concerned.
That's exactly what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
He became fascinated with Indian music. In fact, he already knew something about it and worked it into his music, because before the Beatles and the whole psychedelic hippie thing turned Ravi Shankar into a superstar, and the hippie counterculture, the jazz musicians and the classical musicians, they knew who Shankar was and who all these other Indian cats were. They knew who they were back in the 50s, and Yusef Lateef was the first jazz musician, so to speak, to employ elements of Eastern music and jazz.
Well, let me ask you, because the Miles Davis Bitches Brew, was this an attempt? Was this along the lines and the attempt of the jazz artists wanting to explore higher or different horizons as far as music is concerned? Is that with the Ravi Shankar and discovering different modes. What was that? Was this during the same time?
It was approximately the same time. In fact, there was a short period of time when Miles actually had a tabla player and a sitar player in his group. It was a very short period of time. The tabla player was named Badal Roy, and I had the honor of meeting him a few times. And he told me about when he was playing with Miles. And at that time, with the Bitches Brew and a Silent Way period, Miles was expanding on different things. He was employing elements on the one hand of people like Jimi Hendrix and Sly Stone and James Brown, and on the other hand, he was using some of the mid 20th century composers, taking what they were doing, people like Avram Khachaturian or Mussorgsky or Stravinsky, and using it in this context of what they call jazz. And my own opinion is that at the time you had the people like Coltrane and Albert Ayler and Ornette Coleman doing that whole free jazz thing.
Right.
But Miles was the first one to do it with electric instruments.
So Miles was basically doing it, was like a free jazz kind of thing that he was doing. Is that what they called it?
That was his interpretation. Yeah, they called it.
What would be a definition for free jazz?
That's
as opposed to
hard to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to pin that kind of thing down because, but basically what it did was that a lot of jazz would improvise within the framework of the form of the song.
Right.
Whereas a lot of this quote unquote free jazz would improvise with the actual form of music itself, like Ornette Coleman was the pioneer of that, and he took things to a completely other level, exploring and experimenting with having more than one tonal center within this music. I had the opportunity to play with him a few times myself, and I was telling him how Indian music works. Where you have this one single tonal center, and that forms the basis of everything that the raga is built upon. And he told me that his music can employ any note as the tonal center.
Yeah,
and he told me the tonic is in the heart.
Right, but see, the problem that I've always found, especially as far as free jazz is concerned, is that it didn't have a form, and that was its problem, because the human being, especially when you talk about the human being utilizing his senses, and especially the sense of sound, it has to go into his brain to have a form. It has to formulate. It has to formulate to mean something, because the human being is a structured creature.
Well, that's a valid interpretation. I would counter that, however, with the idea that there is a form to a lot of it. I mean, some of these people get a little bit self-indulgent. I'll grant you that. But like, for instance, Ornette Coleman, one of his more famous pieces, Lonely Woman, it sounds like it's but if you break it down, it's based on a very simple thing in D minor, with a break that shifts to a G minor that resolves back to the D minor, and then you add things to it with the idea that you are freeing the music from the confines of the difference between melody and harmony. That's why he called his thing harmolodics, where he saw melody and harmony as not as two separate things, but as identical things, and
the problem,
and then the form of that actually emerges from that. In fact, there's another
What's
somebody.
interesting is just on that point that you're making, as far as melody and harmony is concerned, harmony has to have a complement. I mean, it has to be complementary. And a melody has to say something, and then on top of that, there has to be a syncopation, whereas they meet. And I mean, if they don't meet, then they're basically just doing their own thing.
Yeah, well, that's
And my question would be, and especially when you're being a creative person, that and creating. I mean, if you just want to do some creativity for yourself, that's fine. But for your listening audience to actually comprehend that, I mean, seems a bit much.
I don't know. I mean, because on the one hand, granted, some people are, they don't know what they like. They like what they know.
Okay.
And on the other hand, there's also the consideration that this music is very, very difficult to do well, and very, very difficult, very, very easy to do badly. And yeah, I mean, you've really got to know what you're doing, and you have to listen to what everybody else is doing. It's very much like our conversation that we're having right now. We didn't rehearse this. No. We didn't plan this. Right. Those of you who are in the audience listening to William Kareem and I jabbering away at each other about these things, right. This was not scripted. I didn't even know that I was gonna turn on the mic and bring him in here. I was gonna play some music. Right. But it happened, and the conversation happened spontaneously without a pre-planned form, and it has a meaning. It has a beginning, and the music, and this thing that's happening here with this, it has free jazz can do that. It does do that when people have the mastery to bring this out. And like I did a performance once where I played the Indian instrument, the dilruba, with a duet with the great saxophone and flute player Daniel Carter, and we walked on stage. We had no preconceived idea about anything, and I played a D. That's all we did. That's all I did. I played a one note, and we took it from there, and we improvised the entire concert. Another time I was on stage with the same instrument, two saxophonists, a trumpet player, a drummer, a bass player, and a guitar player. And the bass player played a figure that based around a G minor chord, and we took it from there, and we listened to each other, and we responded to each other. We took our time. We made space for the other guys to make their statements, and we would musically comment on what the other person is doing, and we took it there. I got it. But that was free jazz, and it had a melodies.
Is that free jazz, or is it like what we were doing just a couple of seconds ago when we were both talking together? When we're talking together, I mean that's free.
Yeah.
When we talk together, then you can't really comprehend what each person is saying. It's like you said, if you give the person space so that...
And I wasn't talking over you.
Yes, you were.
And I was talking over you.
Yeah,
right.
Because that's how it sounds with Miles Davis's famous song, Bitches Brew. It's just a bunch of, everybody's talking at the same time.
I don't know. I don't hear it. I don't hear that.
Okay.
I hear something completely different. Okay. Something else enters my brain when I hear that music. And more importantly, I have a specific emotional reaction to that music, which is actually more important than anything. I mean, if I played, say, E flat major 7 chord to a D7 sharp 9 chord, and then an E minor chord, if I had my guitar here and I played those 3 chords with you, you would hear this and you would have a certain set of emotional responses to this and emotional associations to those chords.
Right.
But you don't know what those chords are.
No, but I do know what those chords are.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
But I would, and I'm saying
you wouldn't have to know
but
that
I'm
to
saying
have
to
that
you, I
emotional
wouldn't-
response,
well,
that
but the
visceral
emotional-
response.
But the emotional, right? But the emotional response would say whether this was harmony or disharmony.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it would say, and whether it piqued my interest, or you know, it was on my plane. I guess if you were supposed to play those three notes together.
Sometimes dissonance has its place in music as well. I mean, you listen to, for example, to the Brandenburg Concerto No. 3 in G major. There's parts in it where it shifts to a G minor, and then it starts playing all kinds of dissonant harmonies in order to build up a certain tension, and then it releases that tension and it resolves back to to its original structure.
Right. In order to, so then it creates a mood.
Mm-hmm.
It changes the
Right.
The mood of it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you have to follow.
That's what I have to follow. And speaking of following, I think I'm going to play. You could be jabbering about this all night. I'm going to play a little bit of music for you. I dug up something that many of you.